Hello and welcome to episode number undefined of the Metacast Behind the Scenes podcast. I'm your host, Ilya.
And I'm Arnab and we'll get into why it's undefined in a little bit.
Yeah. So for those of you who just stumbled on our podcast accidentally, we are co-founders of the podcast app Metacast. Metacast is an app that has transcripts and just overall it has great UX for listening to podcasts. We're kind of reinventing what the podcast experience could be. As in reinventing the wheel a little bit, but also reimagining how things could be better. So Metacast is in open beta right now. It's available at metacast.app for both iOS and Android. And we are going to launch publicly very, very soon. On this podcast, we talk about how we build the company, how we build the startup, how we build the product. That's why it's called Behind the Scenes, I guess, kind of obvious. Actually, maybe we should have called it Built in Public.
Yeah. Builders Gonna Build is our other podcast. So that's where we interview other people and that goes well. Builders Gonna Build. This is like Build in Public. Yeah, makes sense too.
Yeah, if you rename it, it would be a third rename.
But it's okay. Behind the Scenes is, I think, pretty clear too.
Yeah, I was just thinking if somebody searches for like Build in Public podcasts, ours would come up in the SEO. We don't have to make this decision right now on this podcast recording.
Yeah, because people want to listen to what we have to say other than deliberating on this decision. So let's skip forward.
Yeah, because our arguments, especially about very, very simple topics, can get really, really intense.
Hey, don't say naming is easy. Naming is one of the hardest problems. So.
True. All right, so what are we talking about today?
So it's been a year. I think, when did we officially incorporate? Like in July or June?
Oh, it's a good question. I think it was June 8th.
Yeah, so, and we are recording today on June 5th. So it's almost exactly to a year. I think I had started coding a few months before, but you had not started officially yet. And you were still kind of leaving your job and going through all that, right? So it's been a year. We wanted to reflect on how that year has been, how our life was before. You were at Google, I was at Amazon, and how it is now, what's working, what's not working, and all that.
Yeah, and for those of you who did not listen to our episode 24, so episode 24, it's a two-part episode that we recorded almost immediately, I think just a few days after I left Google, because I left Google on June 1st, 2023. I didn't want to get in trouble with Google. That's why I didn't start coding or doing any kind of artifact production before I left so that they can't go after me and all that. We recorded that episode in June 2023 where we talked about what it took to leave corporate jobs to start a company, and we shared our aspirations and like how we thought about finances and all that. So now it's been a year, so we thought it would be actually a great opportunity to reflect on how that year actually went and where we are, how we feel a year later. Because, it felt very rosy when we were talking about this, because it was all just pure joy and aspiration. But now a year in, at least on my end, I realized it's not just flowers and unicorns. Yeah, there are some challenges in a good way, right, that we wanted to talk about. Actually, just before we go there, I saw a reel on Instagram today. I don't know who this guy is, some old dude, and the recording is like from, I think, like 1950s. He says there, don't ask life for less challenge, ask for more skills. Something like that. And it really stuck with me because there were challenges, at least like for me, some personal challenges. And I think overcoming those were some of the most difficult parts of my professional career, but also some of the more exciting and inspiring part of my career.
And then this will be the main topic today. We're also going to talk a little bit about the new updates in the app. There are some exciting new things. And as always, we end with what Ilya and I are listening to, because we started this Metacast thingy because we love podcasts and we listen to podcasts all the time. So we also tell you about what we're listening to and maybe some highlights from our last few weeks.
Yeah, and we totally heard back from people that they like those podcast recommendations.
And the 30-minute challenge. So I think I heard back from one listener saying that it was great that you tried to keep it. I think it was very close to what we tried to keep it to. So
I think it was like 29 minutes or something, the last episode.
Yeah. Today we'll try to keep it to about 45 minutes because this is a meaty topic. We have some more other stuff to talk about, but that's the promise. Let's see.
So do you want to play rock, paper, scissors to see who starts first?
Oh, no, no, no. You wrote your thoughts first. I have been ruminating on it this morning during the dog walk and kind of just wrote up some rough ideas. I know what I want to talk about, but I want to hear your side first.
Yeah, okay, let's take turns. Actually, last week we didn't know what this episode would be about. We had some ideas, but nothing concrete. But then I just had a flash of inspiration and I wrote a LinkedIn post with my reflections on like a year after leaving a corporate job at Google. I'm like, why don't we talk about this? Because this is an interesting topic to expand on. I'll start with the first point I made in the post. That was my favorite year of my career. To put things into perspective, so I'm 40 now, I'm turning 41 this fall. Overall, I spent 8 years working in corporate for DHL Express, like a traditional corporation. I spent 2 years not working, studying at Wharton, doing my MBA in the US, which were also like fantastic years because I didn't have to work and I had time to reflect. And then I spent 5 years at Amazon and 3 years at Google. And then I spent a year at Metacast. So 16 years of corporate career in total. And as I was reflecting on last year, I'm like, I can't imagine going back to the world where somebody who mastered the corporate ladder game, right, sitting me down for a quarterly or annual review and like, oh, you are rated whatever, like above average on this rubric and above average on that rubric. That rubric you're kind of below average, or whatever the term they use, whatever needs improvement or whatever it is, right? And here's what your peers have to say, you need to exhibit these behaviors and all that. I dreaded that time of the year. For one, I just never liked constructive feedback. Wait,
do you mean you like destructive feedback?
I like flattery.
Or you don't like feedback?
I just like when people say like how good I am, right? No, I mean like in all seriousness, who doesn't, right? People just come like, I want to improve, tell me all the shit you want to tell me about. But I think there's something there that if I talk to somebody who I respect and I consider a mentor and they tell me this could be better, that could be better, given your goals, and I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Or when I hear somebody on the podcast, actually, I'll make a recommendation of the podcast later in the episode, and I'm like, yeah, I'm totally not doing this. And it slows me down, it works against me, and I can definitely take this. But I think what is different in corporate is, for us as a corporation to get more from you, we want you to do more of that. And this may or may not be consistent with my goals. What I'm reflecting on is, in corporate, there is a goal substitution going on, I think. When you're in corporate, your goals get to the next level, get that new title, get promoted, move to another team. So you're always chasing an ego-fueled next step. Status, and money comes with status. But also, I feel like those companies like Google and Amazon, they pay really well. No objection to that. But they almost never talk about money. They talk about the growth and like getting to the next level and more impact. Google really loves the impact part. Now, I think a year after this, I can be very honest with myself. I'm like, if I ever had to go back in this environment, it would be only for the money. I don't care about the status. I don't care about the title. I just want to get paid more.
Would it be only the money or like some happiness in what you're doing also, right? For me, it would be that.
Yeah, I think, definitely I want to find joy in what I'm doing.
But the status levels and all doesn't matter to you. Yeah, same. You and I are very similar, and that's why I think the annual review kind of thing where they do try to ask you what are your goals for yourself. It doesn't really fit with Amazon's goals or like Google's goals, because you and I are very entrepreneurial, very independent people, and we like to like build things, go fast, and those things very often, as in senior roles, don't work well in big companies where you're working on critical projects or like there's the whole brand or everything else to think about. It's not just like build things and release and talk to the customer and go fast.
I would even say the more senior you go, the longer timelines you have, the more you're removed from actually doing things.
I'm absolutely going to talk about that when we get to my part. So totally agree, yeah.
And that's what I mean by like your goals versus company goals and money, because I may be totally cool, let's say in a senior PM role, where I actually get to do the real work. Digging into the data, talking to customers, etc. But then my income is capped at a certain amount. So even if my product goes through the roof and makes a lot of money for the company, I don't get to make more. Maybe they may give me a bonus, right? But it's marginal. So if you want to get to the next level of income, you have to get to the next level. And then let's say you go from senior to principal, and then the nature of work changes so much that you may or may not be happy doing that. And then going from principal to director, that's just like a very different role altogether, where you become a people manager and all that stuff that comes with it. So it's like, if you really want to build, I mean, some people just love it, right? But some people who really want to be doing things, but instead they're actually going for the manager role. I actually had a manager who was a VP at Amazon. They said, I'm jealous of what you get to do on a day-to-day basis. At the time I was like, yeah, I get it, but I'm jealous of how much money you make. And and that's a paradox, right?
Right. By the way, since you talked about the annual reviews, I'll try to keep this to max 2 minutes, okay? My feel for it is that if you go back a few years in Amazon, we used to do very, very intense peer reviews. I would write up like a page and a half reflecting about each and every person that I worked with. And that would be, back then I was an engineer in a team, so maybe like I'm writing this for 6 to 8 people. But this is like, I'm looking back at everything they have done over the year and I'm writing it up. My perspective on what they did great, what were some like areas that they could do even better. And when we were doing this is like at least 2016, 17, I want to say, that period, I loved the feedback that I got from people because that was, I think, very deep and meaningful feedback. Over the years, Amazon as a company figured out that we're basically spending the second half of January and like almost all of February doing this, and everything else slows down to a crawl because this is really intense work, like looking at somebody's whole year and writing it up and doing it for like 6 to 8, or maybe some people were doing it for 12 to 15 people.
And the more senior you get, the larger is the body of work you have to review for like more senior people, right? And also more people ask for feedback.
Yeah, the more is the weight of your words at that time also, right? The blast radius is huge. That was intensive. So Amazon at some point, I want to say maybe around 2020 or so, we decided to like keep this to a few words. I don't remember what the word limit was, but it was like Twitter style feedback. You write about somebody's work over the year, but maybe a few tweets, 2-3 tweets kind of level. That's what you would write.
So Arnab's work is dead ass.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean a bit more, but you know what I mean, right? Like a few tweet level length. And then the manager used to always summarize everything for you, so it's anonymized. But now, after we did this, I felt like this is useless. I had a few managers who were really great at reading all this and giving me their opinion on all of this and kind of laying out a great picture, and that was great. I also had a few managers who like gave me these tweets like go figure this out, and it's like doesn't mean anything to me. Like I don't understand the context of these sentences. I don't understand anything in here. So I mean, I totally understand the balance, right? Like, do you want to spend the whole corporate companies a month and a half in doing this annual review, or do you want to make progress? I felt like we were kind of caught between two worlds at that time. I saw it was not as useful anymore.
So can just to summarize that happiest year of my life thing, right? So it's just like removing that part of my life that I never enjoyed is not strong enough, but hate is probably too strong. I never liked it, never made sense to me. This whole reviews and all that, especially when I worked for managers I did not like. I think I did a count of managers and I had like 22 managers or something in my career because people changed a lot. And there were a few really great managers, there were really great people. There were a few, maybe just a couple that I felt really miserable with and I wanted to like rage quit every day. Most were just mediocre, doing the work that was expected of them. It just never made sense, but I was sort of too scared to do something else. And so I was like keeping doing what I knew how to do. Breaking away from that, finding the courage. That by itself makes me feel very good about this. Not in a bragging sense, but more like internally. And we will talk about that. There was a lot of effort to undo some of those habits. But one of the things that I found really, really exciting in this whole being on your own thing is the flexibility of not having meetings almost ever. Even when we have standing meetings like our stand-up, or not stand-up, like weekly sync, we can always move those, we can cancel those. So there is just so much flexibility. I traveled a few times in the last year, like camping, going on a retreat here and there. I just liked it so much that I could schedule something on a couple of days' notice. Well, I don't even have to do notice at all. But it's more like I want to go like day after tomorrow, and I just book tickets and I just tell you guys, okay, so I'll be out. That kind of thing was almost impossible in the corporate because you had to count your days. That was the thing that I hated the most. Is like, oh, you have whatever 14 days of vacation left, and you have to book like a flight that returns a day early. You pay more. It's like a red-eye flight instead of maybe taking a day or two longer and making it more convenient for yourself. Undoing those constraints of corporate, I really enjoy that. So yeah, I'm curious what some of your takeaways of the last year were.
Okay, I think like you said, you were pivoting between don't like and hate. I want to say the word I would use for my experience towards the end, okay? In the beginning, I loved it. Towards the end was frustrating. Two things, I think, speed, but not being able to take decisions on your own, even though teams are supposed to be very independent, and having to go through like layers and layers of reviews to like make decisions. That was one thing. The other thing was lack of agility, which is kind of a flip side of this is once you have the information that this is clearly not the right way, and this happens in software all the time, right? Like you have a design, you have something, and you start building it and you figure out, okay, this is not going to work out exactly. Let's go this other way. That took a lot of convincing to like convince other people that, yes, we're not going on the right way. Let's change directions right now. And sometimes it would take like a couple of months because of meeting scheduling, like you said, right? Because you have to like talk to directors and all that. And their calendars are free maybe a month out or month and a half out, right? Because of that, you still keep doing things for the next month, even though you know that this is kind of wasted effort or going towards the wrong direction. And I found this hugely frustrating.
You know what? One piece of advice that somebody gave me at Google when I first joined, something was not working process-wise. And I was just showing some heroics and picking things up and making sure that things get done. And this guy told me, let the thing fail. And I'm like, but why? He's like, yeah, if you don't let it fail, yeah, you'll never expose the issue in the process. But that's just not who I am. Because it makes perfect sense in that environment. But then it never made sense for my personal sense of work ethic and just the desire to get things done. I remember ultimately succumbing to this because it was just so frustrating and just like letting things fail so that things get exposed. And it just never sat well with me. But it's just one of things in a big company environment that may go against the personal sort of, not just goals, but like personality.
When I hear that, I feel like this would apply really well. Take an example, right? Like, let's say your team does story points for velocity estimates and you feel like this is not giving us any value. But you don't want to take the time to convince everybody of all this. So you're like, okay, just let it fail, right? Like after 6 months, we'll figure out that this is useless. I think I would be okay with that, going down that path. Versus like when you're building a product and you realize that like this is not the right thing to build or the experience we're building is not going to be the right thing, you can't let it fail at that point. It's going to be way too late. You know what I'm talking about maybe, but anyway, doesn't really matter. And I think a lot of people working in Google and Amazon and big tech will not feel this unless they get to the staff or principal levels where the decisions that you're making or the strategy that you're laying out are way higher level. And so there is much more review and all that. For the most part, when I was an SDE2 at Amazon and generally when I was an SDE3 also like a senior engineer, it was well within the team. So I could convince people easily and didn't have to like go through so many hoops to like collect information to like convince that this is the right way. Anyway, to summarize all of that, that was the big frustration. I feel like in the last 1 year, that has been blissful. There has been no frustration. There are some negatives that, like you said, there are also negatives that I've felt. I'll talk about it in a little bit. But that, I would say, is the biggest thing. Like the agility that we have taken on, we've changed many decisions over the last year. But imagine building a similar product inside of Google or inside of Amazon. Those changes, like let's say we decided, okay, we're going to not launch on iOS right now. We're going to launch on Android. That decision, Oh my God, think about how much like convincing you would have to do to like convince everybody that that's the right thing to do at this point of time.
Yeah, including lawyers. God knows who.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what I think I enjoy the most is the agility and the amount of things that we do ourselves. I take pride in the things that we build, and there are some negatives to that also. That's been the biggest change in me is I love that part of it.
Totally. So what did it go to from frustration for you? I'm looking at the notes and I'm sort of asking you a leading question.
My life as a principal engineer in Amazon, I want to say was frustration and collaboration. Those were the two biggest like words I would use to describe that. Now I think it's become building in an agile way and anxiety.
Do you still feel anxiety 1 year in?
Yeah. I mean, I feel even more now than I felt a year ago, I think. Because a year back, it looked pretty clear-cut, like this is where we are going and all. I feel actually more anxious for you than for me personally. Because, so if you listen to episode 24, you will know all of the finances and all that we talked about. So I won't go into all the details, but Ilya, you are in a single earning, or actually zero earning family right now. So I'm more anxious for you than for me personally to start making money. But also, I think the biggest thing that gives me anxiety is the decisions that we take, not knowing whether it's right or wrong. This needs a bit of like actual explanation to do. It's not that at Amazon or Google, we also knew what was right or wrong when we made decisions. But there was somebody sitting higher up who would bless your decision.
Even if it's wrong, at least you don't take responsibility.
Yeah. They would either reject your decision or proposal or accept it. And in a way, they would bless you that, yes, this is the right thing.
And this is exactly why your income is capped at a big company, because you can always offload the risk to somebody else.
Yes. Whereas now I feel like because we take these decisions, we cannot know what's right or wrong. There is much more anxiety about are we going the right way or not? And there's no way to know about this, I think. And this is like, if you want to say earlier, frustration was maybe 60%, collaboration was 40%. Now, building and the agility, the happiness part is more like 80%. And the anxiety is more like 10%, I think. And the rest is, like you said, flexible. That has been one of the best things, like you said too. You talked about travel, which is, of course, like just go figure out what to do, which is beautiful. In my case, that's not as true because my wife, again, she's working. But I can just like figure out, okay, yeah, today is great weather. I want to do a longer dog walk, or I want to play tennis today. And the flip side of that is the productivity that I'm having because of this is also like, I've never been this productive in my life. The rate at which we build or decide things and all that. So
yeah, maybe just to give an example, we shipped a few UX changes. This week, actually, I was doing 1 PR per day. Those are pretty simple changes, but still, like being able to just see how the app changes visually day after day, that has been so exciting.
Yeah, I'll give you one more example from my side. The thing that I'm working on is subscriptions, right? Like so that we can actually start making money. Turns out I cannot test it easily on my simulator. Simulator is when I'm developing, it's not a real app. It's on my computer, it's running in a simulator. And I cannot test some of these things there. So I have to like make assumptions, ship it out to my actual phone, like go through the whole build and release process, and then I can get a feel for it. Imagine having to do this in a corporate world where you're not going to get a code review done in any amount of time. And this is what I enjoy the most. We just put everything inside a feature flag and like go crazy. Let's see what happens and then we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I would get this notification like Arnab asks you for a review and then almost immediately the PR is merged. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Like, what are you going to review? We don't know if it's going to work or not.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Imagine going through this in a corporate world where somebody is going to review it. You're not going to check it in without a review. And to review it, they're going to read the code and ask you for the assumptions and all. And I'm in a place where I don't know. I'm shipping this, assuming this will work or not work, or I want to see the exception that it raises, and then we'll go from there. So,
cool. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned anxiety about whether we're moving in the right direction. I feel like where we are, we've not really made any irreversible decisions yet because we are still working on pretty much table stakes at this point. Like being able to charge for the app, audio playback issues that we have, some of the UX improvements, those are not special. I have a bit of anxiety about whether our app is differentiated enough. Because when we started, it would have been. But over time, as we pushed our launch date further and further, other apps starting to add transcripts, most importantly, Apple. Other apps have it too now. My hypothesis right now, given where we are and our kind of resourcing, we can create better user experience. We can create better user experience and compete on that. Eventually, we may have to make something extraordinary to be much better than Apple or Spotify. We just don't know what that is right now. We will see. I mean, we have some ideas about like better playlists and stuff like that. So what better workflows, which some apps have, like Overcast, for example, has it. But their UX, I just couldn't figure it out. It's very complex. Yeah, it's not for everybody. So we could make things like that a lot simpler, which Spotify and Apple are unlikely to do just because they serve a much broader audience. That's a bit of anxiety that I have. Like, is our app good enough for people to pay for? And until we actually have the functionality to pay for the app, which you're working on, and until we launch it in the app stores, we don't know.
But that's coming like very, very soon. So stay tuned. Yes.
Very, very soon. Yeah. It's a very long game. Going back 1 year prior, I thought if we don't start making money in 6 months, I would just call it quits. But then, I've made some adjustments to my lifestyle, and I don't want to talk details on this episode, but I did extend my runway. I could go a lot longer now, but at the same time, here's a revelation I had. Even if I go completely broke, I will not regret it. Let's say right now, if we just shut the whole thing down, or you and Jenny continued and I just left, and I would go back at a corporate job, and I would like sit in front of my computer, like in that weekly meeting, listening for like people looking at PowerPoint. Even like talking about this makes my energy go lower. It just feels a huge no for me. I can't go there. I would rather change my lifestyle, maybe deny myself things that I'm used to, than to go back to that. Just this whole feeling of being free. In the beginning, actually, it's also difficult because in the beginning, free feels like, what do you do with all of that? I remember reading in Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek 10 years ago, where he was saying that when you start working that lifestyle where you only work 4 hours a week, you don't know what to do with all this time. You want to fill this time with something. And you default to what you know how to do, working more, meetings, or what have you, right? And I remember when I first quit the job, I had this thing where like, okay, I have to work 9 to 5 regardless. I would like force myself to work. I would even force myself to work longer hours and all, just because that's the only thing I knew how to do. And if we didn't have meetings, I'm like, we need to have more meetings. It's just because you have to have more meetings, just to fill the time, right? When somebody tells you what to do, even on a higher level, right? If you work as a principal at Amazon, it's not like there's somebody who always tells you what to do. But you know the priorities, there are goals, and you figure out how to achieve those goals. It's still, on a higher level, there is a goalpost that you are chasing. In a startup, it's just different. You have to be self-disciplined about this. For me, that particular part was difficult to like change the mode of working, start doing things differently, especially that I had so much anxiety about money. I had like panic attacks. I was sleepwalking. I was overeating a lot. I was drinking too much coffee, all of that stuff just to fill in that anxiety-driven and fear-driven hole, right? And I had fatigue for like months. I would like sleep for 4 hours, wake up, feel fatigued, drink a lot of coffee. It was just awful. And it's one of those things that look glorious from the outside, right? But like when you look at what's actually going on, it can be very difficult. It was very difficult.
One thing I can relate to here, we've talked about it in some episode in the past, I don't remember when. The way we used to work kind of required that you are producing uniform output every day, every week. 9 to 5, the whole point is like you're producing that same kind of work every day, every week. And personally, I have always had insane few weeks of crazy productivity where I can't sleep and I'm like working at night because I can't sleep. This is so exciting, or like I'm making real headway. I want to get this out today. And then there would be weeks where I'm like completely drained of energy. And I've had managers tell me that that's not okay. They call this burning yourself out, and maybe it is, right, in a way. You're burning yourself out for a few weeks and then you're not doing anything for the next few weeks, and that's not okay. And you were dinged for it. This is what we talked about. This was a struggle for me to adjust to, but I think eventually now I'm caught up with it and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have some days where I don't get much done, and that's okay. There are also some days where I'm like going crazy building things, and that's very exciting. And this is a normal way to live my work life.
Yeah. I think the burnout happens when you work like crazy because you're excited and passionate. And then instead of resting, you actually try to keep that uniform baseline output regardless, despite the fact that you actually need to recharge. And then by not letting yourself to recharge, you burn out. That's the thing, yeah. And I think in corporate, there is just no room for that. Because even if you don't code and you're doing more like leadership job, there's just so many meetings and all that just keep draining energy from you until you reach that point where you actually just burn out. And then you have to use your precious vacation days to like recharge. And there are never enough.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention here is there were a few points in time when I was like, I don't know if I'm making progress. Not in the same way like in the corporate, you're making progress to a new level or something, right? Because like in corporate, whatever you do, you still get paid. Especially at the times when we were working at big tech, you had to be really, really bad to be fired. You could always just like, not necessarily coast, but like do the minimal and like feel like you're not doing enough, but it's still sort of enough for the company. And you kind of just coast along, right? With a startup, you may just do nothing for days, or you do something and it doesn't feel like a lot of progress because nobody's tracking it. There is no accountability mechanism. So one thing I started doing in the last couple of months, which you might have noticed, the effects of it. So Google had this thing called snippets. Well, almost nobody does it this way, but back in the day when it was still run by the founders, everybody had to write snippets of what they were working on this week. Just a few bullet points. What I was doing when I was at Google, I really liked that whole idea. Every day, whenever I would do something, I would just write it down as a bullet point, and then at the end of the week, I would just create a summary of those bullet points. So what I'm doing now, I have a doc. It's like a to-do list. But there, I also have at the bottom bullet points. Like June 5th, I did this, this, and that. June 6th, I did this, this, and that. And then when we do our stand-ups, I actually just copy from there. And those bullets have links to pull requests or issues or documents that I worked on. And when I actually compile those in the list, it fuels that sense of achievement, especially when I was working on like smaller things here and there, maybe some admin work for like Apple App Store, whatever, like some nonsense work that you just wish to forget about, and you forget about it. And then 3 days later, you don't even remember you did it. But those sort of snippets help me. I don't know if it's fake or not, but it gives me some dopamine in terms of like sense of accomplishment.
I think for me, this comes from the release notes and the videos that you have started doing. I love them. By the way, listeners, if you want to follow us, follow our progress of the app, then you can go to Reddit. Our subreddit is Metacast app. And then Ilya does these release videos there every time we release, which is about once a week. For me, if you go look at the app like from a couple of months back versus now, the amount of differences you will see there gives me that sense of like, yes, we're building so much. And this is one of the things I wanted to say is working with you and Jenny. We always knew that you and I, we like working on small teams. But this, a year later, this gives me the hypothesis that we had that I would be much happier working with a small team than with like 3 different teams of 20 people each, working on strategy for different goals. This is much more fulfilling for me. Being very close to what we're building it together with a small group and shipping out things and seeing the change in them.
Yeah, true. Actually, one thing I wanted to also note is when we first started a year ago, I got into coding a little bit. And then I was kind of coding on and off because I would just reach that frustration point really, really quick because the thing is complex. And I would take sort of a larger piece than I could chew, and it was really driving me nuts when I couldn't figure out some things. And then over time, I think I found that sweet spot where I am coding mostly UI changes, where I don't have to deal with all the complexity of state management and the backends, where I would like obsess about the transparency of icons on an episode tile, right? So things like this. And that actually gives me a lot of joy. Previously, I would have to like maybe give you a bunch of feedback, but the thing is, it's not like feedback, oh, make it so and it will look great. It's more like try this, right? Try this, try that. But now I can just try it myself. What's the difference between 87% opacity versus like 95%? I can just play with it myself. And it's very empowering because I also see the results right away. So kind of being able to work on that, highly visible, but also fairly simple changes, that gives me a lot of joy. I'm really enjoying that part, and also like working on CSS on the website, yeah.
And I think we've started to slowly get into that flow also. So one of the things you're working on right now is the intro screens, right? Like when you start up the app for the first time before you sign in, you're going to see what you can do with the app. And we've never had this till now. Our app, till now, if you launch it, this is the very first time. You have no idea what Metacast is. The first screen, it loads up and says sign in.
Yes.
Right? And you're unlikely to sign in at that point if you don't know anything about it, which is okay because we are in beta.
Actually, I think that explains why we have such a big difference between the people who launch the app and people who listen to at least one episode. I think that sign-in screen is what probably turned them away.
Maybe, yeah. But now you're adding, what is this app going to give you as the first thing before we ask you to sign in? Of course, you can skip the sign in also. There's like a guest mode and all. Anyway, if you don't know anything about the app, you're unlikely to take even that effort to like sign in as a guest, even if you don't want to sign in. Anyway, so you're adding that. But the way we did that is Jenny did, I want to say, the plumbing work, let's say. Plumbing work to set up how are these intro screens going to work and all that. And you added all the life into them. Again, going back to the plumbing analogy, you painted the walls and all that. And now we're like combined between the two. We're ready to launch that feature.
Yeah, I'm doing the home decor.
Yeah, home decor, yes. And I think that way we also get to move way faster.
Yes, some of the recent discussions we had in Slack, I feel like I have a lot more tolerance towards just like experimenting with minor UI things. I'm actually enjoying this. I think that works quite nicely, especially when I start to give feedback. It might be easier for me to just like take it over, go that last mile, right? I really enjoyed that part of being able to get my hands dirty while actually not being frustrated.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're slowly moving towards what's new in the app already, so let's just get to that section.
Yeah. I think by the time this episode comes out, we should have version 0.72 out. So that version has a few changes. So first of all, we had this flow where if you want to follow a podcast, you add it to your favorites. So you heart a podcast. You hit that heart shape on the podcast cover, and then it gets added to your favorites. But then we were thinking, favorites. What if actually you have a podcast that is your favorite and the other ones you follow, but they aren't your favorites? Or you have some favorite episodes that maybe you want to keep in your like stash of things that you want to come back to. So we changed this whole concept from favorites to follow, just like Twitter or Instagram or other products do, where you just follow a podcast. And then favorites could eventually be a custom playlist that you create and you can add things there. So yeah, we changed favorites to following. That is one change. It's kind of a small UI tweak, but I think it's an important one. Then we added images to the podcast category. So if you go to the search screen.
That was a hideous screen that we had. I took a screenshot of it yesterday. The previous hideous screen that we had, yeah.
Yeah, we should add a picture to the show notes. It was just put together very, very quickly just so that we have something. And it showed. So thanks to our intern, Jack, we had a different design for that and we've implemented that. It took only half a day. It took actually longer to find the images that have commercial license for free. It looks great now. Then we also did a redesign. So in the player, we have the tab for transcript, that tab for bookmarks. They had very bare bones, empty states. Like if you don't have a transcript or if you don't have any bookmarks, it just showed something along the lines like, unlock the magic, click here. And instead, we just added some GIFs there. So it looks a lot nicer. Then the other thing that I'm personally very excited about, we made episodes transcribe automatically when you start listening to them or when you add them to listen later playlist. This has been awesome. I mostly just add episodes I want to listen later, and by the time I get to them, potentially a few days later or maybe hours later, the transcript is already there, which I find very, very helpful. Basically, we just want to disappear that notion of generating the transcript from people's consciousness. So by the time you get to listening to an episode, the transcript is already there, and you can bookmark it, you can share, you can screenshot, do what you want with it. It's really cool. Then, like you said, we added the intro screens to the app. So now, if you are signed out, you open the app, you see those screens that tell you what Metacast is about. So we welcome any feedback. We put those screens pretty quickly, so I think they need a little bit more work. So any feedback is appreciated. So those are the user-facing changes I think we've done recently. I think the auto-transcribe was part of the previous version, but everything else is new for the version that comes out. You've been working a lot on the subscriptions, so that we can charge, but all of that is behind the feature flag.
It's behind a feature flag, yes. Well, you cannot as a user. We can, because we are enabled in the feature. We can actually pay for the app in iOS and Android now. So,
but we pay fake money, right? It actually doesn't charge our credit card.
Yeah, we pay fake money because it's in beta. We pay like $7 for 5-minute subscription or something like that. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, and actually the funny thing here is if we make it available to beta users, they can test it and pay fake money, but they would still become premium. And I don't think there is a graceful way to cancel this. So we would have to only launch this when we actually launch and can charge real money for the app.
Cool. All right, let's wrap this up. Let's go with your...
because I've been talking a lot.
Okay. All right, I've been listening a lot. I think the last few episodes we talked about, I was still going through the 3-body problem. So that's what I said all the time, was that I'm still listening. There are massive epic size books, right? I finished that, and then I was just looking up. I think I have like 70 or so episodes in the last 21 days that I've listened to.
And how did you discover how many episodes you listened to?
Oh, yeah. So this is a feature we should have in the app. We don't yet. Your listening history. I tend to like finish the episodes, complete them, so they go away from like my face in the app when they're done. But then in the app right now, there's no way to see what I've listened to in the past.
Did you say they go away from your face? That's what you said?
Yeah, like it's in the home screen, right? You know what? In our app, if you have not finished an episode, you have started it, it's going to show up in the home screen so that you can quickly pick it up again. And I love that feature, except when I'm like towards the end of an episode, I'm done with it, but it still doesn't detect that it's done. So I tend to like finish those episodes and we're done, they're gone. But then they're like completely gone. There's no way for me to discover them via the app anymore. So I ran a query right before this meeting to look at all the episodes that I've listened to, and there were like 71. So yeah, that's a feature we will have in the app at some point. My most interesting listen was from the shortwave, so NPR's shortwave. The episode is called What Are Sperm Whales Saying? This is about us scientists finally starting to understand that they have like a full vocabulary and there's like actual language going on. This is not just like dog barking or an animal bark. There's like full, detailed, nuanced. They're not words because they're sounds. I mean, what are words? They're sounds too, but in a human notion. But they're actually like full language level communication going on in there. And I had a notion of it, but I didn't know how much we have come to understand it already. And so that episode goes into it. I love that one.
Why are they called sperm whales?
That I don't know, actually. I do know that there's right sperm whales, which are off the East Coast, and they're nearing almost extinction level because they have been the most harmed of all the whale species around North America. I don't know why they're called sperm whales. We'll have to look it up, yeah. Might be a funny story, I don't know. The other interesting things I want to say, acquired Microsoft. That's a massive episode. I'm about halfway through it. I saw that there's a new Starbucks episode. I'm curious about that. I haven't started it yet. When we were screen sharing at one point, Ilya, I saw that you were listening to this, the daily our 401k is a failed experiment or something like that episode.
Oh, interesting. Actually, I wasn't listening to this. I was just testing something. It's so funny because, yes, it was an episode that I was doing some tests on, but you thought I was listening to it, so you listened to it.
No, I listened to it before you, like a few weeks ago. It was a good episode. Like, it gives you the history of how 401s came to be, and it's a really interesting history. It was a workaround, and the name 401k itself is a big workaround. It's a very interesting episode. Go listen to it. Yeah, it's fun. Other than that, quick mentions, the sci-fi podcast, Sci-Fry, so that's Science Friday. That podcast has an episode about dark energy and one about high-speed rail. Both were great. Lots of interesting information about what's happening right now. Loved it. And I know you don't like the hard fork, so don't listen to the full episode.
I do like hard fork. I just don't like it enough to prioritize it high enough in my feed.
Oh, I thought you didn't like their style or the banter that they have.
I like their style. It's just not the podcast that I run and listen the moment they have a new episode. I really loved their interview with Kara Swisher. I loved it.
Right. That was great, yeah. It was very personal also, right? Because they knew her and one of them was a tenant in Kara's house or something. But their latest one that talks about Google's new AI, that episode I'm talking about, right?
Oh, is it the one that Google makes you eat rocks or something? Is it what it's called?
Yes. Google started adding AI into the search results and there's been a lot of problems with that. So this is the episode about that. It was good, but I want to talk about the opening bit. So one of them, I won't go into details, we are short on time, but they talk about launching or hard launching your boyfriend on the grid.
I have no idea what this means. Something on Gen Z.
Yes. What a soft launching your boyfriend is, like maybe your boyfriend's shoulder shows up in an Instagram photo, but you don't see the full person, but you have a suspicion, okay, are they dating now? Is she dating somebody or is he dating somebody? That's a soft launch. Hard launch is like a full picture and name and everything. So one of them did a hard launch of their boyfriend. And on the grid means it's not on your Instagram stories, which go away after 24 hours. It's actually a post. So it's going to stay on your grid. But anyway, the opening was like amazing. Lots of Gen Z lingo and hilariousness. Other than that, Roland Garros French Open is going on. So that's been my daily, everyday pick up that episode, add it to my listen. Later it gets transcribed. I listen to it. And finally, I finished the Shogun TV show. If you like Game of Thrones, you would love this show. This is like Japanese Game of Thrones back in the Middle Ages. Loved the show.
Were Shogun some kind of warriors?
They're kind of like the emperors across the islands. Then I liked it so much that I picked up the book and the audiobook. So I'm going through that as well.
Actually, you might like the book. I listened and read, probably like 2021, I think. It's called Musashi. So Musashi was one of the famous samurai warriors. He was just like a legend, right? So it's a book about him. I think it's based off his book. I think he wrote like a book of 5 rings or something. And then one author compiled the story of Musashi. I think it's like semi-fictional, but it's a really good read. I really enjoyed it. But it's like, get ready for like 40-hour long audiobook. It's very long.
I added it here.
Yeah. Wow, that was a lot of stuff. Cool. So I did not listen to 70 episodes. I was also traveling and I did not listen to pretty much anything. I mostly read stuff. I read/listened 3 books in the last couple of weeks. So first is The Revolutionary Road, which is a 1955, I think, novel by Richard Yates. It has also a movie called Revolutionary Road with Leo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. They're very young there. I think it's like 2005 movie.
But this is still after Titanic, when they were still way younger.
Yes, I think they were like in their early 30s or maybe like late 20s when they did The Revolutionary Road, and they were very, very early 20s, I think, when they did Titanic. I mean, this couple works really, really well in tandem as a fictional couple, right? So Revolutionary Road is a movie and a book. Actually, the book is much better than the movie. It's about a couple that aspires to change something in their lives, and they fail miserably at that. And the movie is it just makes you pity them. But the book, it's narrated from Frank Wheeler, who is the main character portrayed by DiCaprio in the movie. And it has so much depth of emotion that he goes through and like self-talk and all that. Incredible book. I read the book and then I watched the movie the same day I finished reading the book on a plane. Before that, I thought the movie was great. After reading the book, I was like, movie is just like way below. The story is just not as good as the book. It's one of the best things I read, fiction-wise, recently. I really loved it. Then I also read Celestine Prophecy. It's an interesting book. It's a bit cringy in terms of like how it's written. But it's about sort of synchronicity in life and coincidences that are not coincidences, that are just like sent to you by the universe. So the book has a lot of lessons, really, really nice kind of lessons, sort of laws of how things function. But it is written in a very cringy way. I only read it because it was somebody's recommendation. In the end, I kind of liked the outcomes that I got from the book, but not the book's style. So, like, yeah, read it at your own discretion. And then the last one, so speaking about Kara Swisher, when she was on the Hard Fork podcast, she advertised her book, right? The Burn book. I had no idea what the book was, but I picked it up, the audiobook. I was curious. I have very mixed feelings about the book. So I think it's called something like Love Story or Love and Hate Story about Silicon Valley. So she talks her own story of how she came about to be a reporter and all that. Actually, she's older than I thought. I think she was born in 1962. I thought she was younger. My dad was born in 1962, so she's my parents' age. I thought she was in her 50s. But anyway, it's beside the point. In that book, she talks trash about a lot of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. She talks a lot of trash about Mark Andreessen and Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, two Marks. But at the same time, she talks some really awesome, almost like stories that make you tear up about Steve Jobs and her business partner, Walt Mossberg, and a few other people. But specifically the Jobs part, I really enjoyed. I mean, she said some bad-ish things about him as well, but they were completely outshined by the positive things. And then she like completely trashed Elon Musk and all that.
Do you recommend the book?
That's the thing that I have such mixed feelings about. I'm like, this is an interesting book, but there is just so much trash talk. Like the trash talk, I would give like 2 stars out of 5. But then those sections about her own story and also the story about the Steve Jobs, I would give like solid 5 stars. So I think at the end, I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads.
Did you listen to the audiobook also or no?
I listened. It's also read by Kara herself. Even though I listened at 1.2x, so you probably lose that nuance at that speed. Here's an interesting thing. There is a plug for our competitor. So Spotify, if you have a premium subscription, you get a lot of books included into premium. So that book is included in premium. And I'm like, I'm not paying $15 to Audible. I can just listen to this. I don't have to wait for like 3 months on library. It's a book that's not worth paying money for. So that's how I would also say this. Get it from library, listen to it for free on Spotify if you have the premium account. But the thing that I realized while listening to this is, I think in the last episode I said that I can't listen to audiobooks anymore. They just don't feel right to me. And I think this time I finally figured out why. I think because the pace of the narration is constant. So you sort of get just filled with information very, very fast. And the information is written sort of in a very concise manner. So you get basically a fire hose of information coming into you. And basically for me, it's like there is no emotion in the book. It's just information. Whereas when you listen to podcasts, especially when people talk to each other, so there is emotion there are pauses, people take a long time to express their thoughts. They're working around things that can't express very fast.
So this might actually explain, I don't know if we went deep with this ever, but I remember mentioning this and you thought it was like, oh, I don't do that at all. So when I listen to audiobooks or podcasts, this came up when we were talking about the continue listening feature that we have in our app. I never do that. Even audiobooks, when I'm listening to an audiobook, maybe I'd listen for about half an hour max. I'll stop it. I'll listen to some music and think about the book. Or if it's like a boring book, I'll just stop it altogether. Same thing with podcasts. I almost never go from one podcast episode to another one immediately. And that might explain the thing that you're talking about. It's going at a constant pace, but you need more time to, I think about it.
Yeah, and I'm trying to finish audiobooks as fast as I can. And then I may end up listening to like 4 hours worth of content the same day at like 1.5x speed. And it's just too much. Whereas I can listen to 4 hours of podcasts because I don't speed up podcasts. And I don't feel overwhelmed. And actually, I usually don't listen to so much because podcast episodes I listen to are usually within 1 to 2 hours range. So I just tend to listen to them in 1 or 2 days. And then I'm done with it. Book is like 8 hours, 10 hours. Yeah, it's just different. Anyway, so I watched a movie on an airplane called Ford versus Ferrari. Such a great movie with Matt Damon and Christian Bale. Incredible movie. I mean, I always liked kind of cars and racing, even though I don't watch sports, but I like the idea of racing. What I didn't realize until I saw that movie is just how much psychology there is in racing. There was this moment in the movie where the Ferrari and Ford go head to head, and then the Ford guy does something that makes the Ferrari guy do something as well, and it changes the trajectory of the race. I won't spoil it. But the thing is, like, it's a pure psychology that was happening there.
If you look at the highest levels of sports, it is actually all that. At the highest levels, Performance-wise, there is not really that big of a difference between different players or teams. So it's all psychological, and I love the heck out of it. The strategies and the psychology, yeah.
So yeah, that's something that was new to me. And also movies like filmed beautifully.
Yeah, I actually saw that movie in a plane too while coming back from Florida.
Oh yeah? It was probably like advertised as one of the top movies or something. It's a really good movie. Yeah, so I guess just one last thing I would recommend is the Tetragrammaton podcast by Rick Rubin. I've been binging on some of these episodes, and I really liked the episode with Adam Mosseri, who is the head of Instagram. Again, I have mixed feelings about this because he talks very, very nicely about some of the ugly things on that side of the big tech, but at the same time, I really liked his explanations of like what product management is, how products are built, to somebody who basically Rick Rubin was like, I have no idea how these things work. Like, can you explain to me like what these different functions do? And he asks questions that make it clear that he has absolutely no idea because they are almost like quote unquote stupid questions, right? Mosseri really explains it really, really well to an outsider. It's a lovely interview. I really enjoyed it.
All right. So if you have listened so far, feel free to stop it at this point because you probably know what Metacast is already. But if you don't know, go check out metacast.app. That's our website where you can install the app from. We have links to our newsletter and podcast in there. And if you have any feedback for us or any words about this episode or our podcast generally, send us an email at hello@metacastpodcast.com. See you next time.
Thank you. And by next time, we should actually figure out why sperm whales are called so and talk about it on the episode.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my next question to ChatGPT. Hope there's no hallucination there. All right. Bye.